flashback to the end of 2017, and Tim Melia has just been awarded the MLS Goalkeeper of the Year award. For those that had really followed his story, it was a really awesome underdog achievement. He bounces around the league for a bit with RSL, Chivas, just gets a few starts between those teams over many years, ends up being a pool goalkeeper, ends up going from all that to Sporting Kansas City, where he ends up being the top goalkeeper in the league. His style was something that was pretty easy to get behind too. Had this nice blue collar, play like it's your last game sort of style, almost chaotic, but just enough in control. Very exciting, and something that a lot of people were pushing for him to get at least one start with the national team, if not a couple more on top of that. And everything made sense at the time. Watching this, yes, he's the best goalkeeper, easy pick. Fast forward a year, we get to the end of 2018, and Lee ends up fourth in the voting for goalkeeper of the year. And the voting has always been kind of a popularity contest. Zach Steffen ended up winning it. He's got a rocket on his back. He's going to Man City. Easy pick there. So Melia ends up slipping down, but he's still being recognized for his efforts, and everything still makes sense. But now it's 2019, and it doesn't seem like things make sense anymore. And Melia is statistically one of, if not the worst goalkeepers in the league, and a lot of fans have been scratching their head as to why. What happened to Tim Melia? To explain this, I'm going to take a wide tangent from an excerpt from the legendary David Priest. He recently spoke on the whole VAR scandal at the Women's World Cup and said the new rules could actually help the goalkeepers, and this was an opinion that's in the vast minority. So he ended up saying a couple of quotes from the article here. More and more takers, like Eden Hazard, for example, are goalkeeper dependent, so they'll wait for the keeper's first movement before choosing which side to shoot at. In that respect, it's more beneficial for a goalkeeper to hold their position on the line for longer rather than to guess. And if you've done your research on the taker, you shouldn't be moving too early, as all you're doing is giving them an advantage by committing before the strike. And anyway, in my experience, if you look at any compilation of best penalty saves, you'll see the goalkeepers who do advance the most forward off their line towards the shooter don't tend to prosper any more than anybody else. That's because from a goalkeeper's point of view, if you advance 2 or 3 yards, again, forward towards the goalkeeper, you're only narrowing the angle of the strike very slightly, whilst narrowing the time you've got to react to the shot quite substantially. So what Priest is saying here is that the farther you're getting towards the goalkeeper, you're sitting at that angle, but only by a few inches, but you're losing a lot of that time. So it ends up backfiring on you. So he goes on, if you're 3 or 4 yards off your line, you're at a point where you're relying on the ball hitting you rather than making an active save because there just isn't time to react. As a goalkeeper, if you're making early movement either to one side or forwards, they're going to pick you off. So if you're coming off your line, it's a negative. We're talking fractions of a second here, but goalkeepers have to be more patient. Now, Tim Melia's problems aren't really found in his penalty game. I think he's faced 2 this year, and neither have been scored on him. But this principle does permeate throughout his game, and one that we haven't really seen exist in previous years. So let's look at the first week here. Is a goal Melia gives up, and it's a late goal where he just can't quite figure out his footing. The ball swings out to the left, but then it's come back to the right. Melia has to find enough line on the ball, but he goes from 3 yards out from the goal to 2 yards, jumps up to 4 yards, a lot of back and forth movement. And the movement is so distracting that he gets his feet set only about the point where the ball is half towards him. He's lost all that time as he's bouncing back and forth, and he can barely push off from his legs. His front foot doesn't even get any pressure off, and he just ends up just awkwardly collapsing. Fast forward to week 8, Melia tries to make an aggressive play in a 1v1 situation, and as the striker is falling down, Melia decides to charge forward then, but unfortunately for him, this is the same time as the ball struck, and the ball slips past Melia at a distance where, had he stayed still, he could have saved the shot. Instead, his forward movement tricks him into missing the shot, and a little bit later in the match, he again runs down his line. He's maybe 6 or 7 yards from the center of the goal, and this has cut down his reaction time twice over because he's gone down that line, he's lost that time there, but also the movement has cut down his time because as the ball is striking, he's still trying to get set, so he's lost the time there. And then also just in this specific play, how the ball is looped over, he's at the worst part of the arc. He's right under the highest point there, and he can't even get close to making a play. If he hangs back a little bit more, he might be able to make that play. The last example from Melia is a little nuanced and probably a little too nitpicky, to be honest, but I do think it's a good example of just how close Melia is falling short at the moment. It's a similar play to week 1. The ball is back on the left, Melia's right, and the ball slides inside. Now, Melia doesn't take these massive hops back and forth, so that's good. We like that he's toned that down a little bit, but he's opted to move down his line. You can see he's coming down a little bit instead of sliding over with the ball, and so he's a little bit too near post. He's a lot too near post here, and as this ball slips by him, he's able to get a fingertip on him, but because his positioning is so out of line here, he's not able to make the play. And I think if you ask him, this would be something he'd say, yeah, I should have made that save. And if he can figure out his footing a little bit, instead of opting to go forward and just stay back a little bit and make that shuffle over, he'll definitely make that save. Footwork is something very difficult to keep sharp for any goalkeeper on the downslope of their career. It's tough for any goalkeeper, but especially as you're getting into your 30s, it's just very difficult to keep sharp. And Melia, who turned 33 in May, doesn't have much time left as a starter in the league, but sloppy footwork is only going to speed that up. So to finish up, we're going to quickly look at an aging goalkeeper who has adopted a different technique than what Melia is using. Now, every fan of an MLS team thinks they have one of the best goalkeepers in the league, and you ask a Sounders fan, they'll probably say Fry is one of, if not the best goalkeeper in the league, and you could ask any other fan, they'd probably say, yeah, we've at least got a top half goalkeeper, if not a top five. But whatever you think of Fry, top five or not, you have to give him credit for effectively incorporating a deep lying position. This is something he's been using for a little bit now, and he's been having a lot of success with it. You've got his most iconic save against Toronto from a few years ago, but he's still pulling off the same approach in 2019. You can see how deep, how close he is to the line. So he's opting for time instead of cutting an angle. And so he's backed up, and a big reason why this is working for Fry is because it gives him the time to get to where he needs to go. So yes, shots are going to be farther away from him because he's so much closer to his line. But for someone who might want to have that time as opposed to being farther down the angle, this ends up working really well for Fry. Now, he's not a perfect goalkeeper by any means, but this is something I've been pretty impressed by. It's kind of an atypical approach of how deep he is, but he ends up pulling off really well. Tim Howard, on the other hand, he's someone who's been kind of notoriously seen as a goalkeeper who's at the top of his six, if not even farther on shots. And this is something he found success with in his younger years and mixed success in his later years. But for Melia, it's odd that he's kind of switching up his approach here. Now, it seems like in some sense he's either recognized it or just stopped or is tweaking it here and there. But it is kind of odd that we've seen this almost urgency and anxiousness to get down the line as opposed to just sticking what was working with him. Tim Howard being that aggressive, that's something he's done his entire life. But from Melia, he's found success being a little bit more patient. And when he does hang back a little bit more, I think he'll find that success there again. All of this combined with some poor rebounds and some poor distribution from the back has left Melia in a more dramatic situation than he ought to be. This should be a season where it's a little bit more calmer and something he's finding his stride and some consistency. But now we're seeing all these errors kind of snowballing up. So if he can get back to basics and he can get back to what's worked for him, I think we'll see the Melia of old. But if he starts getting a little more anxious and getting a little more aggressive with his line, I think we're going to continue to see these problems here pop up. Do you like Melia? Do you hate Melia? Do you think this is a sign of more things to come? Do you think this is just a bad funk that he's in? Comment below what you think and give the channel a sub.